Build a life worth living. 360 success. 360 success.
Welcome to 360 Success Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Knight, and I'm joined today by my all-time favorite person and many of you's favorite person as well, my lovely wife of 32 years, Amy Knight.
Hi, everybody.
And today we're going to talk about what it's like working alongside your spouse. We've been doing that for 30 years now, been married for 32, almost 32 and a half now. And we're going to talk about what it looks like navigating the challenges and the synergy of being business partners while we're married. You know, when you do that and then you have family like ours and all, to be successful and have longevity is almost like being a unicorn in today's world. And so we're going to talk through a little bit about that and the struggles that we've seen, the successes that we've seen, and how we were able to navigate it. I mean, let's get started. Let's talk about the early years. When we first started, we were still newlyweds. Basically, we'd been married, 2 years? And we did
a month shy of 2 years.
Yeah, crazy stuff like building out a house and remodeling a building for our office.
Concurrently.
Yes.
While living with your parents.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about that before in one of the podcasts, but it was exciting to have a home and an office that was going to be our own, although, we weren't 100% confident. We had this dream of serving the community. So talk about what that felt like for you.
Well, I loved getting everything organized and put together and, scrapping things. At the time before we opened, I worked at Dallas Baptist and, they were going to throw away the copier. And I'm like, no, I'll take that.
Yeah, it still worked and we used it for years.
So just all the things that we had to put into thought before we even opened our doors, and then all the manual labor of both sets of our parents and us literally working to build out the practice, and then working in the clinic with it being you and me eating peanut butter and jelly, ramen.
The long hours, and because when you start out, you're not just the business owner. I wasn't just the doctor. You weren't just the assistant and manager. We were the marketers. We were, everything. We were HR, all the things. Plus we were a married couple. And so we had a shared vision first of a successful marriage. That was the key. And that was first. And then you want to talk a little bit about why that's important when you're facing the difficulties that you face as a new business person?
Well, I think it took us a while to learn the difference of being at work versus being married. I mean, we're always married, but I can still vividly remember you handing me something and saying, copy this. And I'm like,
I knew that was coming up today, by the way. We didn't discuss this ahead of time.
And so we just had to learn that how you worked, because before that we had never worked together.
Right. And I've got this intensity, especially when we're busy, and it's the work face. And
you could call it that, the resting work face.
I remember I come out and I handed her something and I'm like, make a copy of this for me.
You did not say it like that.
Okay. Anyway, I said, make a copy of this. How about that? Something along those lines. I was with a patient. I go back in and I needed the patient to fill it out. And I'm talking to the patient and 2-3 minutes go by. And so I open the door and I look out. I just look out there and see her sitting there. And she just had this look on her face and she said, you could say, please, would you copy that? Please. And then I promptly received the thing. But there was there's definitely a learning curve.
Yes. And then we also had to learn to have boundaries once we got home, because all we did was talk about work 24/7.
Yes.
And that was, at first you had to, because we had to figure everything out. But we had to also bring a balance. Once we had Josh, I think he was a year old and he knew what deductibles and insurance was. So we had to be careful about how much we spent talking about work so that we didn't just consume everything.
So if people are watching this and they're wondering, can you really work together and maintain a relationship? Well, I think our business and our marriage are excuse me, are evident of that. But I mean, what would you tell people?
I think probably the biggest thing for us, and it took us, a little bit to figure out what our roles were. Because I remember, I think once you got established, I thought, okay, well, now it's my turn to do something. And I didn't know what that was. I didn't finish my degree. And I think it took us a minute to realize that, your role was more in the patient care, the doctor part of it. And then once we started hiring associates, that was, your lane. And then we were able to carve out, okay, well, your responsibility, Amy, would be more in the team and the training and the culture and all that. And even then, it still took us some time to, if there was a need or a crisis or whatever that came up, sometimes you would tend to address it in not always the best fashion.
Hang on. Me?
And then I was called as the cleaner to come in, and he didn't really mean that. I know he came in hot. And so
I've gotten better about that, because I used to, if something upset me or whatever, or I saw something that I wasn't being done right, and I would just immediately come in, and I would come in hot and not filtered or refined, and want it fixed right then.
And in public.
And, that is a tough lesson. I had to grow and mature as a manager of people and leader of people, to where, and it still sometimes I have to fight against it, because I want to correct things right then, but it's best to praise in public and correct in private. That goes a long ways toward building the right culture. But defining the roles early in business, it's a great concept, but sometimes you don't even know what the roles are going to be. And like she just said, we evolved into, obviously on the clinical side, that's me, but then managing and leading doctors and clinical staff. And then, she was leading marketing and management of people and culture. And so I really think those two things working together and trying to create excellence in both of those areas really helped us thrive. And you're really perfect with that. You love people. I think that's another reason why this has worked so well for us, because we focus on the one thing. And that's kind of driven our marriage too, is yes, we take care of the family and protect that, but we also want our family focused on service and improving their world and our world, and finding a way to serve mankind in a way that helps and makes it better.
That's our North Star.
Yes. Right? Yeah. Service is our North Star. And that's a great way to put it. I
remember one of our boys said something like, why do you do that? They don't even care. They don't even work for us anymore, or whatever the circumstance was. And I said, and then he paused and he goes, well, I guess because it's the right thing to do, which is one of our core values. And so, we're here to serve people, whether they're in our four walls or not. And I think that has, again, one of our North Stars.
So obviously defining those roles, really respecting and identifying each other's talents too, because God gave us different talents, and our the way we grew up and those backgrounds also developed those strengths and talents, which has served us well. And we're very complementary. Well, I remember one time we were in marriage counseling, and you did all these personality profiles, and this may have been actually one of the profiles we did for our marriage mentors program. And I don't know if you remember this or not. We sat down, and the lady sitting across from us looked at it, and she said, you remember her exact words?
She's never had a couple that were like the opposites, but complementary.
Perfectly complementary, like yin and yang. I mean, just everything just meshed together. If you put it together, it's amazing. And I would agree with that. And anybody that knows Amy specifically, she's amazing. And, I'm not just buttering you up, but because you had to take the dogs this morning because I overslept.
That's a whole other episode we could talk about.
So let's talk about work-life balance. We touched on that a little bit, but, it's, if you really want to be able to section off your life, and that's what you consider work-life balance, to where I have to create this bubble where there's absolutely no work involved, and then there's this bubble where there's absolutely no family involved. You need to be an employee, not an entrepreneur or self-employed. You need to be able to clock in and clock out and not have to think about what goes on, because the work-life balance thing that most people talk about is a myth. We like to call it work-life integration. And that's where it's kind of a give and take. It could be at any given moment, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. And and the quadrants you're talking about, they overlap,
Yes.
right?
They're not squares, they're circles. Yeah,
Yes.
kind of overlapping.
Yes. And yet you have to be very intentional. And we were just talking about this through some other lessons or so, that it has to be intentional. If you want to produce good, then you have to put in good. And if you don't have balance, you're not making it a priority and it's not going to happen.
And I think finding the rhythm, I mean, once you've been doing a certain thing for a while and you start to know how each other thinks too, there's a rhythm. It's kind of like, when I'm doing construction stuff with my dad, it's when you need something, the other person just hands you the tool because they're right there with you and knows exactly what you need and when. And you and I have that same thing when we're at work and oftentimes at home. Even when I try to tell you how to cook, even though you're a better cook than me, but
It's hard to fight the Mildred.
yeah, my grandmother's name on my dad's side is Mildred, and so she was pretty bossy, and so our family has a saying that's hard to fight the Mildred in you. But I think finding the rhythm and that allows that natural flow between business and personal life. Something comes up, maybe one of us is maintaining the family stuff going on and the other one has to step aside to handle something and comes right back in. It doesn't really matter if we're at home or we're laying out by the pool playing with the grandkids or whatever. It's like you're always on call, and some people don't deal well with that. We've just learned to take that in stride and create the balance. There is a time where you try to veg out or you're spending too much time on it and it's something that could wait. And I think that's a big thing that you have to identify. And sometimes I have difficulty with that. Maybe a client sends me a text and it's not emergent. It doesn't have to happen right now, but I will, because it's fresh on my mind and I'm kind of ADD, I want to get the thought down and start a response. Amy's really good about just looking at me, and she has this thing that she says,
Choose.
choose. Yeah, choose. And all she's doing is highlighting, are you going to spend time with the family right now? Or are you going to choose to do that? Is it that level of importance that you need to do that? And she's not critical with it. She's loving, but she just wants to remind me that we're doing this right now. And if that's not vital, then choose. And sometimes it's a gut punch because you get carried away because, I'm Mr. Fix-It and I want to go ahead and just get this taken care of. And sometimes you just need to choose. And so, I said it's not cut and dried, and it's not. And that's where you have to weigh. And that's where communication comes in and go, hey, I've got a coaching client, or there's a patient that's dealing with this, or we just had this come through in our team chat. And, it's something, or she will handle it, or I will handle it. And so there are those moments, but still, we're still very intentional about family, about marriage. We're intentional at work, but those are all circles that overlap. When we talk about 360 success, that's really what it is, being able to successfully and intentionally make sure that all those things are working together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it used to be spinning plates in my head, but I realized that is too difficult, and my OCD finisher couldn't handle that because you can never keep them all spinning. So it's seasons, and it's also they overlap. You just have to know that that's how it is.
So we've already touched on this, how we make it work, but there's some times where you have to be able to take it off. Like I have my sweatshirt here. I have another sweatshirt here that has my clinic logo on it. And it's literally sometimes when you have conflict, and we do still have conflict at home, or we may have an issue at work, and you have to take it off like a cloak and be able to just, or put it on. Let's say we had an issue at home that morning with the kids or each other, which we don't have a ton of stuff goes on with each other, but we still do. But, if it happens and then we come in and let's say we have a staff meeting or we've got to come together for a meeting, we've gotten really good about just, separating that out. We will deal with that later. We're going to put it in the box And then that's a MDR technique, EMDR technique. But anyway, put it in the box and just deal with it later. And because right now we have to come together and be respectful of each other and work. And because that's where we are. And then we can deal with that later. And honestly, I don't know if you've found this out, but once you do kind of let that thing simmer and give it the time and distance, it gives you a little different perspective. Oftentimes when you pull it back out of the box to deal with it, it's not near.
Or you forget.
Yeah.
Like, what?
The older we get, the more we
what it
forget
is.
about we forget
That's a
about
good
it.
thing.
But again, time gives you distance and distance gives perspective. You've heard me say that before. And sometimes those things just need time. And same thing as at work can happen at work. You know, a lot of people don't know. Last year I had 2 severe head injuries and it kind of affected things and decision-making processes and stuff like that. And I did a few things as far as making decisions with employees and stuff that where I went around the people in leadership that already put in place. Now you can say, well, you have the right to do that as CEO and leader, but it still wasn't the right. I didn't take it through the proper chain of command or authority. And so it hurt feelings deeply and affected some work relationships. So, you know, Amy was very loving about it, but you know, that was a rough time last year. You know, you gently corrected me, right?
I think I did.
You did.
Okay, good. Yeah, we just had to, well, first of all, recognize that you weren't in a good position to be making those decisions. And I don't know that we knew the severity of everything going on either. But, and then grace, lots of grace.
Yep. But you had said, honey, I think you need to not make any decisions that are affecting either company direction or employee status or anything like that, even raises or anything. And that was, and you said, because I don't think you're thinking clearly. And, you know, and I don't know if you're familiar with head injuries, but you kind of become emotionally fragile too. So that you can be set off in anger or, you know, the other direction in sadness. So it's kind of, it was a tough year, but, you know, it seems like we're always sharing all the stuff we've been through, but, you know, it's true.
No, that's what
Things happen. You get up on ladders to put lights in your trees and you fall down, turn into very expensive landscape lighting. And then 8 weeks later, somebody pulls out in front of me, totals my truck. I woke up posturing and had to go through a bunch of neuro rehab and stuff, but doing well now.
Maybe.
But anyways, that was separating the work and home stress. And then I think one of the things that help us thrive too is just being willing to step back and let each other work in their strengths.
Yeah, that took a while, just like in the kitchen, right? Mm-hmm. You have to either just go, okay, you can cook tonight, or no, I would really prefer to do this. We just have to know that we have the best intentions. But again, that takes time. Someone who's been married not very long may not know what their spouse's intentions are just yet. You know, it just takes time and trust building.
You know, some people just naturally are not very trustful. But when you're married and you're working together or just in marriage, I think always anticipating the best or assuming the best, our minds tend to, let's say someone calls you and they say, hey, I need to talk to you, or do you have a second? Where does your mind automatically go?
Depends, but sometimes it's bad.
If it's something at work and it's one of your managers or something, you're just like, oh no, what now? Right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, what's going on? You know, another fire I got to put out or whatever. And so we have a natural default towards the negative, but you can't apply that in your marriage relationship. It needs to start with, and if your business partners, that their intent is good, and that if you took it and it came across bad, then you kind of have to reflect and go, maybe I just filtered that wrong, or this is where the do-over applies that we've applied in our marriage a lot.
Or this is the problem and you and I need to solve it. That's the problem, not you or
right. Me. Assuming the best, that their intentions are right, but the delivery was wrong or it was interpreted wrong, and then address the issue. That's a huge deal in marriage and in work. And it's that, you know, we don't turn it into a personal attack. It's that the issue is on the middle of the table or the other side of the table, and we're a team. We're going to work together towards resolving the issue, not turning it into a personal attack. And that's just putting problems in perspective. Ups and downs. I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, but there are ups and downs in business, and there are ups and downs, I guess I call it seasons in marriage as well. Seasons in business and marriage, but the up seasons, the down seasons. And everyone thinks that, if you're looking at a graph, everything just grows up and to the right. You guys just grow and you do great. That has success in marriage or life doesn't look anything like that.
No, turbulent waters would be a better descriptor.
Or peaks and valleys. It's like you hit one peak and then you go down into a valley. You build strength and you learn mistakes that maybe put you in that valley. And then you start the climb again. And then you get strengthened on the climb, and then you hit another peak, and then you're going to see another valley. And from that peak, you see the next peak that you need to go to. But that refining process and that growth process in your marriage and in your business and if you do it right and you learn from mistakes, then you get better so that you can keep continuing, moving forward and continuing to climb. And boy, we've had a lot of learning experiences.
Yes.
Can you think of any like big ones?
Business or marriage?
Business or both?
Oh, business.
We're talking kind of business, working with your spouse.
Well, figuring out our lanes would probably be the first one. And then figuring out how to make it in business, because that was very difficult. The first 5 years were terrible. But then, the tenacity and the unwavering of giving up on our mission, I think. And we've had to reevaluate that multiple times in business. We've had some really good years. And then, for example, COVID, that's where it makes you think, what in the world? What do we do now? And the pivots and the reinventions and the new ideas. And we're very fortunate that we don't have to do it by ourselves, that we've got a great team of people that come up with ideas and solutions and support us and do a lot of the work. And we just get to be the ones who manage and pull the team together and pick the people. And
yeah, it's almost like, we like to watch these action movies where these special operators will go in and you'll have, two people, one guy's watching left, one guy's watching right on the point, and then you got somebody in the back that's watching the back, and then you got guys watching the flank. And, when we first started, it was, us looking over each other's shoulder, front and back. And then we were able to add people to the team.
And now we got snipers.
Yeah. And now we got a couple of lookouts too that help. I think so, overcoming challenges and being able to lift each other up in tough times in business and marriage, and just know that, you have a teammate that goes beyond just your partner in business, that they're committed for life, and good, bad, ugly. And there are all those times, as we talked about. But I think it's really important to find a reason to celebrate. And, Amy, you're really big at giving people words of affirmation and a cheerleader. And I have to be very intentional about that. But I think, and you can't take it for granted, just because we've been married 32 years doesn't mean she doesn't need to hear, you did a great job on that. I mean, there was an issue you were trying to figure out with some payroll stuff yesterday. And I tried to, once you got it done, I was like, great job. I sent you a chat. But you got to celebrate small and big victories together. If you have a record month, or you hit a milestone marriage, or, you pay off a car or a house, or, whatever. You have to celebrate those things. Okay, so final thoughts on why it works for us.
Because it was meant to be.
Well, I think, clear communication,
yes.
Open and honest communication in business and personal life. We just don't have secrets. I see some spouses, they don't know each other's code to their phone, and what, we don't have any of that mess. We think that's silly. I mean, you're really not committed, I think, if you feel like you have to have those protections or whatever. So clear communication, open and honest. And then, the next thing on the list here is
respecting boundaries.
Yeah. That's Henry Cloud's book, Boundaries.
Yeah. Well, and it's, again, what we talked about, like staying in your lane. Not that I don't want you to give me advice on how to do culture in teams, but just being respectful of, I have no idea what training is involved in with a new doctor, so I'm not going to tell you. Might give you some input on what you could say, but that's not my
And that's part of respecting boundaries.
Right.
And I can't remember where we learned that, but it's, would you like some input, or would you like a different perspective on that, rather than just going, why are you doing that? Or why are you doing it that way? So clear communication, respecting boundaries. And then this is something that can be neglected. We've neglected it before, and we have to be intentional about this. And that's sharing the vision, making sure that your personal and professional goals for moving forward are together. You know, I remember years ago, you remember when I was supposed to give a presentation at that conference about vision board and all this stuff. And we were going through a tough time then too at home. I think it may have been around the infertility treatments and stuff. So super tough time. And so we were not coming together and thinking like we should. And so I was coaching for this company.
It was our vision board, but it was Ryan's vision board.
Yeah. And so I was supposed to get up and give this thing at this conference in front of a lot of people. And I think it was either on the way or it was that morning I was putting some finishing touches on it. And you just looked at me and you said, yeah, I can't wait to see what our vision board looks like, because we hadn't worked on it at all together. And I just immediately was like, you know what? I blew this one. I don't know. But I ended up not giving it. I just went and told them, I said, I can't, because this is not our vision board. It's mine. And I was supposed to give ours. And so I just bowed out and didn't do it. So you have to share the vision. Not only that, you have to take time to go back and revisit the vision and clarify things and make sure that that's still what you want in your hearts moving forward.
Right, because that changes. Again, seasons, things change. The older we get, less certain things are more important than they were previously.
Yeah, I think the older you get, the more experiences are important to you, and it doesn't have to be some grand trip or something.
Time and people.
Yeah, time and people. That's the big thing, and you start to measure success differently too. I think. So one of the big ones, the reason that it works, is flexibility and adaptability. You used to be one that's like, if I said that we got to do this and this is the way we're going to do it. Here's our plan. If I changed it, she didn't like change because she likes order and she likes planning and all this stuff. But you've gotten extremely flexible and adaptable. Adaptable may be a better term.
Well, kids will do that to you.
Yeah, that's true.
And running a business that is sort of predictable, sort of not.
Well, sometimes business is like a kid. The needs change all the
Daily.
time. Yeah. Sometimes it's just, anyway. Any other closing thoughts?
Nope. Remember, we were going to call it sleeping with your boss.
Yeah. I'm married to your boss is what I say. She calls it sleeping with the boss. Problem is defining who that boss is. I mean, she's wearing the shirt that says boss lady.
What does it say? Making dreams happen.
Making dreams happen. She is the boss lady and I'm the boss man. And together we're team boss, I guess. Yeah. # team boss. But so the things I want to leave you with is that it can be extremely rewarding in business and personally to build a successful marriage and a successful business. And I just want to reiterate the work-life integration over what people consider work-life balance, because it will never be 100% or 50-50 or whatever you think it should be. The key is that you're very intentional about integrating the life into it. Sometimes it's bringing the kids to work with you. And sometimes it's, maybe you have an event outside of work that involves work. Like we've done screening and public events where, we've had our kids out there with us.
It's a legacy.
Yeah. Building, I guess, a legacy business, if you will. We just want to encourage you, if you're married or you're building a business together, stay focused on synergy, on the things that are alike, and realize that the differences that you have actually don't end up being detrimental. A lot of times, I would say most times, those things have been strengths for us, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
And man, when you're teamed with the right person, they see your blind spots and you have to be willing and open to those. So thank you for listening. Let me just encourage you to keep growing, keep communicating. If you love our content, just please like and share it. And remember, the whole goal is that we can help you build a life worth living.
Build a life worth living.